part of world you are in at present. Before we begin with the agenda of today's session, let's have a quick introduction first. So, to all those who are new to Product Tank is part of Mind the Product, which is one of the world's largest community of product managers, designers, and software developers. Product Tank is a formal meetup as within the Mind the Product community, and it is an informal meetup of product leaders and product enthusiasts. There are various chapters as part of Product Tank, which are present in different cities across the globe. As part of today's meetup by Product Tank Delhi, Laura has kindly agreed to have a session on UX research and leading PMs. Laura has about 15 years of professional experience and is working as a group product manager at Typeform. Without much ado, I would like to hand over the stage now to Laura to begin the session.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually pretty excited to be here today. And one of the things, even before I start, one of the things that is most important to me for this session is to make it a conversation rather than like a long, boring talk. So I'll be going through a few slides and sharing a few ideas with you. But whatever comes to mind, share it in the chat, share with us, because I would love to answer questions and engage in discussions. So that said, let's bring slides up.
Laura, if you could, let's just wait a couple of things for more people to join, if that's all right.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, let's do that.
And in the interim, let me also introduce other members of our team. So Shreya is working with Naukri, and she's also a part of the team. I'm working with Times Internet, and Vaibhav is with Infosys. So thanks a lot for agreeing to join us. Yeah. Laura, so if you could tell us a bit about how you decided on the topic, as in that would be great, because we gave you a bunch of topics, right? So then how did you decide, okay, let me go in for this one?
Yeah, we actually discussed a lot of topics, and they were all really interesting. So we actually went back and forth a couple of times trying to find what could be like the most interesting thing to share with everyone. And those are the two topics that are probably the closest to my heart, bringing research and understanding customers, and also working as a team with PMs, either as a manager or being managed by someone who has more experience. And I thought that both would be really interesting for people, and that both actually have kind of like lots of connections that people don't necessarily notice in advance, and that's what I would love to share.
Laura, your voice is cracking a bit. Then are you able to hear me clearly?
Absolutely. Well, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's move log off from here, and you can take it forward from here. Just let me know when you want the full screen. Okay.
Yeah. Amazing. Cool. So I hope this view works well, because at least you can see my face, but you can also see the slides, which are probably the most interesting topic here. So let's talk about impactful UX research and how to lead PMs. But even before that, let me introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Laura, as mentioned, and I build products at Typeform. So my career in product management has jumped from the very early stages where I was working in academia and research before I moved to private companies. And one thing that I get asked many times is if I really work at CERN. So yes, I did, but I never created a black hole. So you're totally safe. All the research running there is actually very interesting, but not dangerous at all. The other thing that I wanted to share is that I have a bit of an exotic background for I would say for almost anyone. I started as a computer engineer, but I actually had a lot of interest in other areas. So I ended up graduating a master's in sociology, and I also studied an MBA. And to me, this makes a lot of sense because it gives me the three perspectives into technology, which is a purely technical one, how it's applied to people and how we can help everyone with technology, and the business side of things, so making companies or nonprofits sustainable. So there is actually a path forward for any idea. And the last thing I wanted to share is that I was actually an exchange student at the Indian School of Business. So I know there's people from anywhere connecting to this call, but I really, really enjoy the time I spent in India. Let me talk very briefly about Typeform. So Typeform is a international SaaS service, and what we build at Typeform are solutions to interact online with people, and those could be forums or could be video conversations or could be chats. But basically what we try to do at Typeform is to bring people together, collect information, but also offer fantastic interfaces to interact with your audiences. And one of the things that convinced me to join Typeform, and that was a couple of years ago, was that the vision of the company is extremely connected to making the world a bit more human, to making business interactions in the digital world a bit more human, which to me is incredibly important for the future. So, other than presentations, what is this session about? Because in general, it's not super clear how do UX research and leading PMs are actually connected. I mean, we could have definitely chosen two topics and divide the session into two different parts. But to me, the most interesting kind of like challenge for this presentation was to bring both areas together. Because research and understanding customers is an incredibly important piece for any like product management life. But the other thing that is also extremely important is interacting with other PMs, leading your team, or being led by those who have more experience than you. And interestingly, there is a connection between research and leading PMs. And the underlying piece that connects both ideas is actually human connection, in particular, empathy. One thing that we consider critical as part of the Typeform culture is starting every activity with empathy. Empathy means that you care about others, that you care about helping them achieve their goals, and that you're able to put yourself in the situation on every moment of the journey. And that connects very much to PM work and also to running research and understanding customers. So let's deep dive and learn a bit more about empathy. If we go back to the book, one of the things that we can see is that empathy is actually a very complex topic, and it has multiple facets. But one of the models that I find most useful to understand empathy is what Daniel Goleman proposed in his Emotional Intelligence book. What Daniel says is that empathy has three areas that are obviously very much connected, but also well differentiated. He talks about cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, and compassionate empathy. So let's go one by one, learn a bit more about each one of them. Cognitive empathy is the desire to understand. This goal that we all have to know more about a certain topic, to know more about how people think, to know more about the situation, to know more about what's going on. That sincere will to understand the circumstances of everyone. Emotional empathy is very much connected to feelings, to emotions. It's not only about understanding what's the most tangible part of things. It's also understanding what people are thinking at a given point in time, understanding how they feel and how this influences their behavior. And the third part of empathy is compassionate empathy. And this one is less about understanding and more about this will to actually help with any situation. When you have compassionate empathy, you really want to help someone with whichever program or interest they have, and they can notice that you can actually help them because you really care. So when we move this model to UX research, you're going to see how the sheer interest of understanding is most of the time what can help us bridge some of the more business-like problems that we can encounter when we want to run UX research and create an actual business impact. But first of all, how do we define impact? Because many times when we talk about research, we find it very hard to connect the results of a research activity directly to a business metric. I've seen at every possible company I've worked for, and I've discussed this with lots of PMs in the past, that it's a continuous challenge to justify research activities, that there is always a very limited capacity, and you have different PMs and different teams almost fighting over for that capacity to actually talk to customers and run research activities. If you think about it from a business perspective, when you're a company, research feels very much an incredibly early stage that requires multiple steps until it can generate some impact. So you may start running research, but then you need to extract insights. Those insights have to become ideas that you will have to test, make sure that they actually generate an impact before you can measure it and confirm that an action was successful. So if you take into account what you know about your company, it's going to be a bit easier to define what's the impact that research can have and actually influence. So there is more chances that you can run proper research. So does your company care about saving costs? Does your company care more about efficiency? Or does it care more about sales and growth? These are two different perspectives, because you can consider research something that helps you reduce risk and potentially avoid taking the wrong actions. But you can also think about research as something that increases the potential of growth as you can expand your product proposition and potentially increase sales. Does your company value innovation, or do they prefer to run the company as it is without thinking that much into the future? Do they feel the risk that if they don't invest in innovation, they will fall behind in the near future? Sometimes this is very much influenced by the industry you're at or the type of product or services that your company offers. The other perspective into impact sometimes is team and team performance. And this one may be the hardest to sell sometimes, because it's very clear that when you engage in research, it helps your team understand better the business. It helps them care more about what they do. It potentially helps a team be more performant, or potentially even reduce churn. And all that is something that feels sometimes disconnected, but that you can create that link if you know that your company actually cares about it. So what we're trying to do here is moving from that initial kind of blocker that we all find sometimes that is very much connected to, we could be doing something else. Why would we put more resources into research? Well, we could be already building something. And what we're doing is converting this into a different way of thinking about opportunity cost. If we take, for example, the savings and efficiency, you could be moving from, we could be doing something else to, we could be doing throwaway work if we don't run research before. And all that extra effort is something that we will have to scrap and start again. So what's most important here when you talk about impact and when you're trying to push for research in your company is to make sure you understand how the opportunity cost is understood at your company, and you flip this idea to explain the value of research. Let me share with you my personal experience and how it connects to the empathy model. One thing that we did a few months ago was a very early stage research. We're trying to understand a new potential space for the company, so very much in the innovation area. Interestingly, the whole company was somehow well aligned to the understanding of that this could be like a great opportunity to create new spaces for our product solutions. But it was very difficult to create a good alignment in terms of which direction to take and how to make it happen. So we organized a research activity, and we invited the whole leadership team to attend those sessions. So we had the CEO, but we also had the chief financial officer, and we had directors from data, and we had the CDO. We had multiple people who are at the top levels of the company, the ones who are driving the company, go multiple levels down and sit with an actual customer and see them interacting with our product, see the day-to-day life. And they got the chance to understand what was the actual struggle they were going for or going through when they were using solutions like ours. So what we did there is we actually convinced the leadership team through this cognitive empathy. They had like a very well-aligned interest to understand the customer experience. So it was easy to convince them that this wasn't going to be a waste of time. But what we did there is we trapped them, of course, in a good way, with emotional empathy. Because when they had the chance to sit with someone who was actually struggling with our solution, or who was sharing with them that they actually had problems to maintain the company running because they could not pay for certain services, or that they were not efficient enough or not generating the results they were looking for. We generated a peak on this emotional empathy that made them feel much closer to those customers and the type of things they could do for them. So this was the way to connect their initial, more, let's say, theoretical interest to understand the situation into compassionate empathy. Now they could talk about Andrea, they could talk about Anna, they could talk about John. These are people they actually met, and build that compassionate empathy and that will to actually help these people. And this is what we could use to our advantage to help the organization understand how important research is to understand more about customers and use that as a lever to make the business grow. So our basic result was, if we can manage to make this desire to help grow across your whole organization, that has the power to create a willingness to continue with research that will actually make a difference for the company. So if we go back to the more like day-to-day research and discovery activities that we ran through any product or life discovery activities, there are lots of things that are not necessarily the most obvious pitfalls or the most obvious problems that you may find. So for example, if we take the classic discover, explore, test, and listen flow to create products and iterate them, each one of the phases can actually be very much influenced by research and can bring lots of value. But of course, they can also have risks. See, if we start by the discovery phase, things that you definitely want to do is to forget about a script. You want to start discovery running research from the basic understanding of what's going on. If you come with these preconceived ideas of what you're going to find, or you come to this discovery phase already trying to validate something that is in your head, what you're going to be doing is missing lots of opportunities to understand better what your customers or what your potential customers need and the areas you could be helping them. So that's also why it's very important to bring new people when you're running this type of research, because they are not biased. They don't have like the previous understanding of the space and will help you come with this like fresh new understanding of the space. When you move to the exploration phase, what you want to make sure you do from a research perspective is to sample carefully. You don't want an incredibly biased group of people that come and tell you what you want to listen. What you want to do here is to focus on their outcomes, to focus on what are they trying to achieve, rather than the sort of proposed solutions they can share with you. Because it's only human when you're exploring a space where someone is struggling to come up with ideas. Oh, what I need is this feature. What I need is for you to change this functionality. What I need is that the price is lower. All those are actually proposed solutions, but not necessarily the outcome or the real need that these customers have. So research has the power to help you understand what they're trying to achieve rather than the individual solutions that it could possibly have. Bringing research into the testing phase is always one of the most common type of research that we can find. So sometimes this is about pure validation of certain features, or just to see if an interface is easy to use. But when you face a testing activity, one of the most important things you have to do is to write your hypothesis in advance. Instead of jumping into tests without much of a plan of what you're trying to extract, what you need to know is what you want to learn from this activity. The other thing that is incredibly valuable from research when it comes to testing is creating a benchmarking framework that lets you compare with other activities, competitors, or tools your own results. Because good and bad means nothing. What you have to do here is to compare against some sort of baseline. Otherwise, what you will be doing is basically generating results on something that you don't really know if it's actually correct or not. One of the other most common risks in this phase is paralysis by analysis. Research is fantastic. Validation is very important. But if you dedicate more time to do all these than to progress, what's going to happen is that your advance will be incredibly slow, and all the opportunities of rapid iteration will be totally lost. And finally, when we talk about the listening phase, this is every activity that is connected to this continuous understanding of what's going on with your customers, with what's going on with the market. And when you're launching something new and you listen to this continuous feedback, there are a few things that is important to take into account. The first one is change aversion. So every time you introduce a change to a service, and this is very obvious, we've all seen the latest version of Facebook, and it was really annoying until 2 days later when it was totally okay. And also, there is very much a connection between what you can learn from a quantitative and a qualitative perspective to actually give you the proper understanding of what's going on. If you bring both things into your continuous listening, that's going to be one of the key sources of understanding of what's going on with your customers and the market. But I know that researchers sometimes are not necessarily the easiest to work with. And this happens for a number of reasons. The first one is because we don't necessarily get enough time from them, but others because they are usually great experts that like to go very much in depth into the details of each one of the activities, which is very different from most of the product processes that are really fast and looking for results as soon as possible. So the usual research process starts with a set of objectives, which is basically what you're trying to learn from these research activities. If anything, that's the most important part for you as a PM. You need to have a very clear set of objectives. What's it that I want to learn? What's it that I want to understand? And with that, you will be able to collaborate properly with a researcher from the very beginning. You will be setting up your list of hypotheses, but they will help you find what's the best method to actually validate those hypotheses. They are the ones who understand quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. They will let you know what's more efficient or what's faster or what goes more in depth, depending on the type of questions that you have. And they will be the one conducting the activity. But take advantage of it. Try to not to outsource research activities completely, because there is a lot that you can learn just by sitting next to someone who's conducting an interview. So make it part of your process. They are the owners, but you are a very direct customer who can get a lot out of those activities. And the last part about any research is, of course, synthesizing the results and the insights that your researcher obtains. One thing that I've seen happening lots of times, and if anything, is one of the most important things about interacting with researchers, is to listen to them. If the report maps what you were expecting, that is great. But if what they report is actually completely different, if it makes you think that they are being unreasonable or stubborn about a certain topic, that's the moment you have to pay the most attention to them, because they notice something that wasn't obvious to you. They notice something that you have been ignoring. And that feeling of something being unreasonable is probably the source of an actually incredibly important insight that can change the way you look into your product, the way you look into your customers, and actually create the most impact when you introduce any change that connects to this type of insight. So please remember that researchers know more than you. They are the ones who are fully dedicated to understanding our customers. So you're surely a big expert on your customers and your product, but they are the ones who have spent that in-depth effort to generate insights. And they are the ones that can help you actually take this one step further and bring those in-depth insights when you make a trade-off decision. So based on what you know, what's the advantage of each one of the options? What would you think would generate most impact? Have you heard anything in this direction that could help me make this decision? And they are the ideal people to make that happen. So empathy and research. If there is one thing that I would like you to keep in your mind out of this session, is that if you bring this empathy thinking into research, you will be making sure that you generate greater impact. You will be generating greater impact by convincing your organization about all that you can do through research. You will be generating great impact by making sure you actually understand what's the context, what are the feelings, and what are the things you can do for your customers. And you could also be learning how to work with your UX research and creating more impact with them. If you understand their work, you engage with their insights, and you make sure that those are brought to changes in your product. So if we talk about leading product managers now, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are lots of connections here with empathy. But to start with, let me go back to 1955. In 1955, Daniel Katz presented his model on how different types of skills are present for different levels of management in companies. He divided these types of skills into 3 groups. He was talking about conceptual skills, human skills, and technical skills. And this image shows you how they are present at different levels of management. Let's go through each one of them for a second. Technical skills are all about knowing how to do your work. Obviously, if we talk about something like engineering on design, this is very obvious. Technical skills for an engineer would be on the development and architectural side. Technical skills for our designers would be something like UI and usability development. When you talk about PM, technical skills for PMs are everything that helps them connect and model how to bring a product to the next level. So these are things like all the business analysis that you want to bring to the table. It can be how you use the results of research. It would be prioritization. And those are technical skills. If we go to the other side, conceptual skills are basically focus on everything that helps you take a step back and understand the problem from a more generic level. Conceptual skills help you connect different business areas and understand what could be the potential impact of something in different directions. They help you assess at a high level what could be the blocker or a problem for an initiative and how to make it proceed smoothly. And in the middle of the two, you have human skills. To me, one of the most interesting things from this model, and it was written 70 years ago, is how Daniel Katz considers human skills as important as any of the other 2 conceptual technical skills at any of these levels. What are human skills, actually? Human skills are everything that goes in the direction of how you work with people. So it's not what you do, and when we say what you do, we're talking about the technical and the conceptual. It's about how you do these things, how you work with your team, how you engage with them, how you build empathy, and how you interact with the empathy you build in others to actually generate the results. And it's interesting to me that it is, first of all, this wide, but also it remains incredibly wide in the model as you move from first line management to top management. If anything, this is the theoretical world and the type of thing we would like to see. But reality is pretty different. What you see from lots of people is that their human skills are no wider than a fourth of what's displayed in here. People focus a lot on their technical skills in particular, sometimes in the conceptual space, but human skills are many times deemed as something that is kind of part of your personality, how you operate, and that's something you cannot influence very much. To me, that's totally not true. Human skills is very much connected to empathy, are obviously influenced by your own personality and how you behave, but there are lots of things you can train to expand them and make yourself more effective in that space. So as I mentioned, most managers tend to focus on technical skills and conceptual skills. They forget about these that some of them even define as soft skills. Even in particular, really bad managers only focus on that, and they don't really care about everything else. But to me, what makes a difference, what you can tell differentiates a good PM from a great PM at any level, individual contributor, manager, or executive, are these human skills. Because it's not about your theoretical model. It's not about how much research you run. It's not about how well you report or your business understanding of the space. It's about the type of things you do with that information. What you've learned and how you want to apply it to your product is fantastic, but it's useless if you're unable to bring your organization to do something about it. And it could be about building a new product area, or it could be about transformation, or it could be about collaboration. But at the end is making sure that whatever you think should be done actually happens. And this comes very much with influence and with connection with people. So going back to our original model, these human skills are about managing others' empathy and how you can influence it to generate results. Our 3 areas model connects very much certain activities that belong to each one of these spaces. So when we talk about cognitive empathy and we talk about learning and understanding, things like openness to inputs, this willingness to learn and to be flexible and to change opinions based on what you've learned, the interest to really understand what customers want, what customers need, and what business wants and business needs is connected to cognitive empathy. But so is the capacity to adapt your message. You won't be speaking the same way if you want to influence a technical leader or if you want to influence an executive to sponsor your research activities. And understanding them and their context through cognitive empathy is what helps you create those connections and execute properly. If we move to emotional empathy and we talk about feelings and how you connect with people, you see everything that is connected to building trust, making sure that you can amplify voices and manage how different members of the team collaborate. But it's also about creating your own network and making use out of it. It's about connecting deeply with the feelings that people have and how those are very important for them to make any sort of change. And the final one, compassionate empathy, is about what you do and how you act or react to the other learnings that you have from feelings or understanding. And here you see everything related to managing trade-offs, talking to your peers and convincing them to make the best decision based on 2 different situations that could be bring value in different directions. It's about influencing other teams to work end-to-end to get the most value to customers, which most of the times is not just about your own product team, but about working with multiple product teams to create end-to-end solutions. And it's also about leveraging our network. Everyone who created a connection with you, everyone who has been interacting with you is potentially someone who can help you move something forward. So this will to help is something that you can influence on them if you understand well their context and their feelings. So about leading PMs, managing PMs, there are two directions here. There is the manager of PMs direction, so managing others, but it's also about yourself and how you're managed by your team leads. The very first thing here is to start with awareness. You have to start to understand what's your own perspective and what's the other person's perspective. If you're unable to uncover what's important for you and what's important for the other person, it will be very difficult to bring both things together into a type of relationship that brings value in both directions. So for example, when you are talking to your manager or you're talking to a team member and you're setting something like a development plan, this is a moment where you have to understand where do they struggle with certain human skills? What are the ones they feel more comfortable with? What are the ones that could actually bring them more value if they could leverage them more? And bringing that to development plans is what makes this growth for PMs incredibly valuable and less connected to things like understanding more models or being expert in Scrum or writing reports. All that is important, but if nobody reads your reports, if you follow strictly the Scrum model, but still you don't have an engaged team, this is what you need to actually make that big change. When you model this type of activities into a development plan, there are probably three things you need to keep in mind. One is those like personal attributes. But then what are the competencies that are built on top of those attributes? And what are the outcomes that you're looking for? So if the outcome you're looking for is more influence, or the outcome you're looking for is creating a more collaborative environment, you can walk back from these outcomes to the specific competencies that are needed to make those happen, and which are the attributes the person has to bring to the new level and be able to execute on those competencies. But that only happens if you have a good understanding of how you approach this type of human activities, and your manager understands how important it is to evaluate them on the current stage and what it means to bring them to the next level. One last thing to note here is environmental influences, because especially as part of like a presentation, this remains very much in the theoretical world, right? Like attributes and competencies and outcomes, I want to influence, what can I do to make all this happen? But all these activities are part of a context. There is an environment where you're moving, and that is very much everything that connects to how your company operates. What are the values that are shared across the different teams? What are the expectations that the team has? And those could be headwind or it could be tailwind. They can help you get where you want to go, or they can very much be something that is stopping you from actually progressing from a perspective of things that you don't necessarily are able to influence for a given point in time. So for example, imagine someone who is looking at a team, and the type of outcome they want to generate is a more collaborative environment. If the company you're working at, if the culture of this company is more in the competitive space, what you're going to notice is, first of all, that creating this outcome is surely much more difficult. Not because you put a ton of effort or train yourself, you will be that much in place to change how others behave or how others operate. And that level of awareness is what's going to help you kind of like size and tune what are the expected outcomes when you start working on certain competencies and improving those human skills and that influence capacity that you have to create a collaborative environment. So it's not only about the theoretical world. One thing that is important to consider here is the context. So at the end, personal development is about managing your own empathy, about managing what you're able or not able to do, what you consider important or you don't consider important, and how you apply that to create a change in others. So let me share another story with you about managing people and about empathy. COVID times have made any sort of human interaction obviously much more difficult. A lot of companies have gone fully remote, and creating that feeling of belonging or understanding what a person's thinking or what a person's feeling is obviously much more difficult if they are behind the screen, if you're not sitting physically in an office, noticing how they interact with others, noticing how the mood looks like, noticing if they're engaged or not. So one thing that I had to do through the COVID times was to set up a completely new team, a completely new product team. And if anything, it was the perfect storm with all the difficult situations. So it was fully remote for people who never worked remotely before. We had very much engaged team members who were moved from one team to this new space, not necessarily against their will, but they were not thrilled either. We also had completely new people to the company, and they had zero context about how we worked as they joined. And to add on top of that, I was bringing an associate PM to the role of PM for this team. So we were basically bringing together a lot of people who were obviously fantastic at an individual level, but wasn't necessarily in place to hit the ground running in terms of collaboration and creating an actual team that performs. So I try to manage lots of things in life as a product. And here I try to apply more of the technical skills to bridge that human gap. And one thing that helps me a lot in doing that is following a well-established model that helps me stop, think, and understand what's going on around me. And it forces me to write down those thoughts and to organize them into things that I can do to improve a given situation. So most of you are probably familiar with things like the business model canvas or the value proposition canvas. Both of them include the business perspective as well as the customer perspective into their space. But those are, let's say, subsets of each one of the two canvases. So when I was thinking about this team as, let's say, a little product on its own, something that I was creating and where I had to make sure that we could create like good business results, as well as creating value for the customers who were those who were part of the team, I thought I could take the same perspective as I would do with the product with setting up a team. And I came through something that is called the empathy map canvas. And I thought I would share it as part of this presentation because I find it incredibly valuable, both for team development, but also when you think about customers. So what the empathy map canvas does is it brings into one single view everything that is about this observation of how people think, feel, and interact to create a good understanding of these customers or team members here. And this model helps you go through this high-level understanding of who these people are, what are their goals, what are their needs, what are their interests, what are they trying to do, but also how they behave and how they feel. So this model makes you walk through a definition of who is the person you're empathizing with and what do they do, but also what's the information that arrives to them, what they can and cannot see, or what they absorb from, in my particular case, things like how the company operates or what are the goals that they have been assigned to them, what they say and what they do. If they say they are comfortable, but they don't necessarily act like that, or the other way around, if they're very vocal, but they are still comfortable. What they hear, so what are the messages and how they interact with others. But finally, how they think and feel. So when you compare everything they are exposed to and their inner interests and goals, what's painful or what is a gain for them from the most traditional business canvas model. And with that, I could create a picture of each one of the individuals that was part of this team and how their different interests and their different needs could be addressed and how they could create this culture of collaboration. It helped me go one by one and understand what they do, but it also helped me create the dynamics for them to actually learn more about others, build that level of trust, and create collaboration from the very beginning. So one of the things I learned, for example, was that lots of them were looking for a team where they could feel they were as part of a safe space, where they could share and say everything that they thought, where they would have the feeling that that would be trusted. In contrast to that, they were more than comfortable to put as much effort as possible to make some things happen. And that gave me a good perspective of what was important for them, which was this group community before the business results. But to me, it wasn't a before, it was the path to get to those business results. So setting up trust was the way I used to actually make this team performant and make this team a cohesive group that helped them achieve their own goals. So at the end, it all goes back to the same thing, convincing people to consider what's going on around them and inside them through this cognitive empathy, this will to actually understand what's going on. The next step to the process is to engage everyone through emotional empathy. As soon as you get to know more about people, as soon as you get to know more about yourself and understand those feelings, they resonate with you and you get to understand how others feel about certain activities, certain goals, and what's the space around them. And creating those two connections is the path to be able to leverage compassionate empathy, that will to help others. Could be by running research, could be by connecting and collaborating more, could be about creating value to customers. But at the end, it's always the same. Understanding others is what helps you bring everyone's mental space into helping and collaborating to build a solution for others. So to me, at the end, the conclusion here is if you ever talk to someone and what they tell you is, we hear you, and that could be a company, could be the managerial team of a company, could be a group of people. If they say, we hear you, and you actually feel it, and you actually can tell that they hear you, that they care about what you're doing, that's the path to create value in both directions, to help someone with whatever they need, but also to feed back all that into the organization, the individual person development, into getting better step by step. So with that, thank you very much. I hope this presentation resonates with you and that you bring this empathy thinking into what you do from a business and from a personal perspective, because it's going to bring you to the next level.
Shreya, thanks. Shreya, if you could just come on board. Laura, thanks a lot. This was really, really interesting. Then let me just. So, what was actually very interesting for me was how you tied the threads between such disconnected, seemingly disconnected topics. And yeah, empathy seems like such a key factor, and it gets ignored so much in spite of being the core element of UX research.
Sometimes it's just considered something incredibly abstract, right? So when you talk about empathy, it just sounds like caring about people or about being nice, right? So what most people need to actually understand why it is powerful is that list of examples. Empathy is about understanding what's going on. Empathy is about knowing how people feel and how that influences how they behave. Empathy is about bringing people to do something about things they care about. And that's how it is incredibly connected to everything product management does. At the end, our job is to make all that happen.
So true. So let's just take some of the questions which have been posted by the audience. So Chitra Aluwalia has posted this question. Research is super important, but has a certain gestation time. How do you generate buy-in, and especially sales-first organizations which think that research is not so important, maybe?
And this is a great one. When you're working in a sales-first organization, it's incredibly common to bring every insight that the sales team generates as what the actual customers need. And that's not true. Most customers share with you whatever would be the quickest and fastest solution they can envision to their problem. But that's a partial view of what could be the ideal solution to any of the things they're looking for. So I agree. It's not only gestation time, it's that understanding that not the shortest path is not necessarily the best path to create value or to make sure that your company grows. That's why, as I was sharing before, these activities that bring leadership team into certain research activities can be so powerful because they get to experience what are the type of insights and what are the real potential business changing opportunities that you can unveil through research by themselves. So they, and obviously it's not magical, that's something that is built through time in different companies. But creating that connection between the leadership team is what eases this kind of like buy-in effort to you. The other perspective into this is connecting sales to actual research, which is something that most companies don't do. If you have not seen a researcher sitting in a sales session, that's the very first thing you have to do. So send your research to one of those sales sessions. Let them sit there, let them take notes and abstract what they can see from that session. They will give you very interesting report of what potential customers are saying, but it will also bring you lots of insights on how the sales team operates and how they share certain messages, which are the insights that you need to actually understand what is the combination between the two and how one is influencing the other when they behave.
The second part especially feels absolutely bang on, because this is something which I think a lot of companies then maybe end up not doing, and that connect is very, very important. Maybe every sales or
I agree, but even if you don't have a dedicated researcher, you as a product manager joining a sales session without that initial perspective, because we have all been there. Like you look into sales and all you can think is, all these people who are promising whatever someone mentions so they can make the operation happen. But when you physically see it at a sales session, you see where they struggle. You see what are the things where they don't have a response and they just directly say, we will find a way to make it happen. And this is the type of research that would also help you uncover different types of needs. Like, for example, what are the needs of your sales organization? Many companies don't have proper sales enablement. And what ends up happening is that your sales team is just saying okay to whatever, because they were not given the chance or the understanding of what's feasible, what's not feasible, or what's going to happen in the near future that they can leverage to convince someone to become a customer. So research is not only in the direction of pure customers, research is also helpful to understand how your company operates and what are the ways to make your own company more efficient. On that note, in like previous experiences, I've worked with companies who had a very specific business model where they were working with only incredibly big corporate customers. This is a very specific type of sales. So you may be selling your product 2 times a year. There is a lot of pressure in your sales team. They really have to convince like a massive mega enormous operation. And that's something that they build through multiple steps. So it's not just like a single person saying, yeah, we will build that functionality for you because I'm sure I will get someone to make that happen. So it's about the internal customer and that empathy you have or you don't have at all with your sales team.
Next question.
Has it? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'll just read out the question, Laura.
Yeah.
The question is by Udita, which says, has it ever happened in your experience that quality and quantity research results were contradictory or inconclusive? And if yes, then probably how do you go about it?
So yes. Not sure if inconclusive. Contradictory or seemingly contradictory, definitely. And this is always about sampling. When you talk about quantitative research, by the whole logic of quantitative research, you have a much bigger sample that is going to give you like the chance to actually measure the amount of, let's say, repetitions of a certain piece of feedback or repetitions of a certain behavior. And qualitative research is much more limited because you cannot run interviews with 200,000 people, obviously. What it lets you do is go in depth, right? The important thing here is the way you sample both and which is the audience that you're extracting for each one of those activities. If you are running quantitative research on top of how your product works and everyone in your product is, let's say, equally distributed in terms of, let's say, company size. But then when you run your interviews, you only talk to your big customers because you think they are the important ones. I'll go talk to my big customers. What you're going to see is that the results are completely different because that group has very different needs from what the average user of your product, of your platform, or your services actually needs. So what's critical here is understanding who am I talking to, which is the source that I'm extracting these insights from, and are they actually comparable? And in most cases, the problem is that you're extracting insights from different people, and that's the whole reason why they are contradictory, because each one of them have different interests, different needs.
That's actually a very good point. I think a lot of us do probably make that mistake. So, all right, thanks for that answer, Laura.
Yeah. So next, Himank is asking, how do you recognize when to draw the line between analysis and paralysis? And then you touched upon this in your PPT, right?
Well, I wish there was like a perfect answer to this that would be like super convincing. There's not, where to draw a really thick line so you're on the safe side. No, now seriously here. So there are two things that influence this. The first one is and it's both at a personal level and an organizational level. What's the level of risk you can tolerate or that you're willing to tolerate when you do certain things? And actually understanding if your tolerance level is the same or is very different to what your organization is generally doing. So the more risk averse you are, the more you will go into more analysis, making sure I have enough information to make a decision. The more kind of like willing to kind of like experiment you are, the lower you will put the bar of like initial analysis and assessment. If anything, the most important thing to extract from these is that it's literally impossible to have all the information you need to make a decision. What you do is, with the information I have available right now, I will make the decision. And if you wait a number of months and you revisit or reevaluate the decision you made with a certain piece of information available when something else has come up and now you understand the problem better, what you will be doing all the time is saying that you took the wrong decision at that point in time. And that's not true. When you decide with the information that is available now. And whatever happens later, it wasn't available the moment you took that decision. So stop revisiting what you did in the past and make sure that when you present something, you're able to share with everyone what's the level of risk you're taking and how prepared you are to actually address those risks, but also share with them what's the cost if you continue analyzing and you don't proceed. And having those two pieces of information and sharing them with, let's say, your senior leadership and understanding what's the level of tolerance for risk is what's going to help you decide, yeah, this is the moment we stop research and we proceed.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Laura. I think it's very important that you put your foot down and you decide on a timeline, because I think as PMs, we do get into this a lot where we are constantly wondering if you wanna like research more, or you wanna look at more data or start doing something. All right, thanks a lot for that answer. I'll pick the next question. So this question, Monish is asking, what are some of the methods of UX research and what works best in your experience if you have small teams, limited research resources, or budget? I think this is something a lot of PMs working at a startup will be interested in knowing, like even I am. Like, what do you think is a good way to go about this?
Yeah. Creativity goes a long way here. So two things that I can recommend. The first one is, you don't need to be a researcher to run research. What you need to know is to have like the will to learn and understand more. So I've run research with developers. I've asked my developers to go talk to people because I wasn't available and there was no research capacity to go around. They built their own opinion, and we didn't need like a massive report. We just had like a couple of developers. They talked to different people and we put that together to make a decision. So I don't want to say lower your standards, but just be mindful of the cost and decide what's good enough for you. And there's actually a book that is fully dedicated to that, which is like what's good enough in terms of research and understanding. And many times that will to feel like safer because you know more, it's just going far beyond what's needed to get started.
Okay, so Laura, Udita is asking, you spoke of influence, right? So, from
Hmm?
a technical, human, and conceptual perspective, out of these three, which of these requires influence the most? And I would not want you to pick human primarily because I think even technical and conceptual require influence to quite an extent, I guess.
They do. And this one depends on who you're talking to. And this is it's actually a really good question, because influence is not, I mean, it's 50% what you do, but it's 50% what you choose to do depending on the person you're talking to. So if you're managing up, the more conceptual you are, the better it is, because the person you're talking to doesn't have the technical understanding, the granularity, or the level of detail you have. And trying to convince them with technical details is not going to work. What they're looking for is that conceptual high-level understanding. When you're talking to like your junior developer, the conceptual understanding of this big business problem is not going to help you convince or influence them, because they need something more tangible, something that they know how to process in order to be kind of like well aligned with you. So think about who's your target audience and choose which one of the three is going to be it's more applicable to their type of role and their level of understanding, and use that language.
Thank you, Laura. So, next, I think.
We've covered this one. Yeah, we can take this question by Anupam. She's asking in terms of emotional empathy, since you covered a lot around that topic. How do you build trust and create a connected network?
You build a trust and you create a connected network by caring about others. And that should be like full stop. But no, let me elaborate. People going to like let me build my network because I want to find a job in the future. I want to learn from people. I build a network for myself. Well, stop it. You build a network for the rest. So you create a connected network, and you build trust when you offer your help, you offer your knowledge, you offer your time to others. And that's how they can build any sort of trust. If you come into a relationship with, this is what I want to gain from interacting with you, you're not going anywhere, because the other person would be as selfish as you, and no one will be helping the other. So the way you build trust, the way you create a network, is by offering what you have. And when you build a trust, others will offer what they have to help you.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
then
I think
because
you
especially,
summarized it. Go on, Kushwa.
come again, please.
I think
What were
Laura
you
summarized
saying?
it beautifully in the first sentence, like by caring for each other, right? That's, I think, the basic and the core of it.
Totally, it's almost as if, and yeah, even Indian, this thing, Indian philosophy in a way has this thing, right? That you do karma and don't care about the results, basically. So in a way, that's very, very true. So yeah. Next, Neha is asking. So she's asking, in the testing phase, as in which you covered, if you're writing your hypothesis, how do you ensure that you are not introducing bias into your the this thing research or
That's actually a fantastic question, and a place where you can definitely leverage either your UX researcher, or if you're working with a data person, because they are usually very well structured and they have a lot of experience in building a hypothesis. The best thing that you can do here is avoid conditionals when you're writing a hypothesis. Because if there is a path for bias to kind of like end up finding its way through what you're doing, is creating some space for like conditional statements and situations. Like, if something happens, it could be because, it could if, that kind of language. It gives you like the space to kind of like ignore the results and think there's something else outside of your statement. So when you're building a hypothesis, it has to be like present tense, direct implication. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. There are no ifs. There are probably reasons behind, but if you need to understand those reasons behind, you will need more hypotheses to test. This one is a no, and it's a no, regardless of you really, really wanting to be different.
Yeah, I think that's a very Kush, I think you're on mute.
I was saying this almost feels like the last question, I think, from the
Correct, yeah. Alright, so I just read this out. So Vaishnavi is asking, in your experience, what are the indicators of a team steering away from the empathy value? That's a very interesting.
Yeah, it's actually a great question. The most obvious indicator is I have something else to do right now. I cannot help you. Like, my team is doing this. I'm not available to you. That's the most obvious one, especially between different like product teams. Like, oh, I have my metrics. I focus on my thing. I couldn't care less about your space. That's already like a big like no sign what's going on here. What you would be expecting is, we're currently busy with this thing. Let's find a way to make whatever you're asking for or whatever the outcome you're looking for happen. Give you alternatives, help you find other ways to make something happen. But the direct, I am busy, come back whenever, is the very first indicator of zero empathy. I only care about my thing. Your stuff, I don't care about it. And if there is a reason for me not to promote a PM, is this type of behavior. Like, your job here is to take a step back and understand what's best for the company overall, regardless of the metrics of your team. If someone else comes with their initiative and it doesn't impact what you're looking at, but it's still more important, you should be prioritizing that. And lots of people, they don't do this. And that's because there's no like a proper collaborative, like basically empathetic way to work in that company.
Laura, but then I thought this was going to be a short answer, but I now want a longer answer, because let me expand this question a bit. And then, see, so from my experience, what I've seen is in quite a few firms where I've worked, sales targets have been very hard targets. Okay, and especially when sales targets are, and then you're slightly falling behind in sales targets and stuff. And then everybody is very, very sales driven, and then people become very, very individual targets focused and stuff like that. That is when teamwork goes for a toss. That is when empathy also goes for a toss. In this kind of a scenario, especially if you are a leader, and obviously you have to, your targets obviously have to remain a priority. They cannot become deprioritized. In that kind of a scenario, how do you ensure that you are maintaining that kind of a culture of trust and teamwork?
At any possible level, what you would be expecting from someone who has like these very demanding targets and actually feels that they genuinely cannot like help someone, but they still think that whatever it is probably better than their own targets, would be to escalate that one level up. From individual PMs, from middle managers, from directors. If you're someone with like a very clear target, and for whatever reason you notice or someone brings to your attention there's actually something better you could be doing, and it's actually better for the company, you don't ignore it. You bring your leadership forward here. Oh, this is much more important than what I'm doing, and maybe I'm not in the space to take the decision myself. Like, I really need to introduce a big change to make that happen. Well, I bring it a level up, and I try to find a way to make it happen, because I do care. I actually want to make that change. I don't like close my eyes, ignore it, and follow my path. That's not leadership. That's just my thing and forgetting about the overall goal of the company. Like, oh, I do my little piece and then the rest will work. No.
So, Laura, yeah, that's absolutely correct. And from an individual contributor perspective, I completely get then that is an approach which everybody should have. But then what happens is maybe then especially when you are, as you said, then a lot of this session also spoke about leadership and inspiring and influencing other members of your team. If that is the scenario, how do you ensure that you are able to influence people into following this kind of a behavior instead of just thinking about their tasks and metrics and so forth?
That's a good one. The first one is leading by example. So if others have seen me doing that, they understand that's something that it can be done. Like nothing's going to happen if you raise a flag and mention that something doesn't make any sense and should be done differently. That's the first one. The second one is by making sure that people actually understand what something doesn't happen and what are the reasons why they didn't happen. So imagine this scenario. I have my metrics, you come with a proposal that makes much more sense, and I bring it up. Like I will bring it up to my top level management. Hey, I've noticed this, we should be doing whatever else. There are probably three possible situations there. The first one is that they don't pay attention to you, we have a problem. The second one is that they pay attention to you and they actually implement the change, awesome, amazing. The third one is they pay attention to you and they still decide not to do it. And there are many things here. There could be a lot of context that you're missing when you first evaluated this would be a better solution or a better change or a different way of doing that. Maybe they know much more and there are constraints or requirements outside of your current knowledge that bring them to decide that this is not reasonable or the most appropriate thing to do. Well, bring that information down, share it with everyone else, explain why it's not happening. I brought it up, this is the reason. Okay, we've all learned we're already better by doing that, right? And that goes in the direction of trust and it goes in the direction of consistency. This is the process, and if something doesn't happen, there was a reason why it didn't happen, and this is it. And sometimes you may agree or disagree, but if someone at a higher level decides something, they probably have a reason to go in one direction or another. Share it with everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. Actually, that makes then yeah, that is true because often you won't have the complete picture to quite an extent. So that is there. Okay, is it okay if I can ask a question?
Of course.
Sorry. Yeah. See, so especially for people who don't have a formal background in research or who are not exposed to maybe all the approaches, then what kind of resources would you recommend for them to get up to speed quickly, or then a practitioner's resource guide or something of that sort?
So the first one I think I mentioned before. So there is this book by Erica Hall. It's called Just Enough Research.
Okay.
This book is fantastic because it really takes that perspective, what's enough for you to understand certain topics, what's enough for you to feel confident or not, in every possible direction, more the quantity and more the quality. So this book will share with you this high level, different methods and what's enough from each one of them. So that would be proposal number one on my side. Proposal number two is do it either through the research team you had at your company or do it through the typical Coursera, edX, whatever process. But run a research activity on your own because there are lots of companies that almost outsource all this. You're a PM, you have a question, you send it to the research team, you wait 1 month, you get a response. By doing it yourself, you get to know, first of all, what do you need to equip that research team with what they need to produce the results you want. You also understand what are the potential risks in different initiatives and how you can ask certain things to obtain the responses you want. And the third one is you will probably enjoy it a lot.
Okay, get it. Yeah. Okay, totally. So, Laura, I think that brings us to the end of the list of questions. Laura, thanks a lot. And then seriously, very, very grateful. Coming into the session, and then and especially before I got to know you and we walked through this thing. Our expectation was maybe you'd be talking about frameworks and the most popular models and stuff like that. Maybe because of your background. So again, that was a bias on our part. But thank you, because you gave us something far more fundamental. I think empathy and then the approach which you spoke about, I think that is far more important, because it will stay far longer than any frameworks could. So thank you so much, Laura. Thanks a lot. It was really fun.
Incredibly happy to have spent the time with you. Also incredibly happy to have shared these with everyone attending. Again, so models and methods are really important. There is a ton of information out there. Go check them out, make use of them. If anything, this is just the kind of like the underlying piece to all those models. And if this stays with you, you will also in place to evaluate which model is appropriate for you at every point in time.
Totally, yeah. And then it's like you can't teach somebody how to. That's it. You can probably teach somebody how to, you can bring a horse to the well, but you can't make him drink water, sort of a thing. So you can't really. So that's why it was so very important to have that intrinsic understanding of empathy. Thanks a lot, Laura.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, then have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
Laura.
everyone. Okay. See ya. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.